Welcome to the best kept secret among Army professionals, the Association of the United States Army, where it's our mission to support you at every point in your career, the support you deserve. A place America's total Army trusts for leadership skills, education, and community. A place where you can build your future and share your voice. A place that hears you. You've checked all the blocks so far. How many more can you check with AUSA in your squad? Advance your future. Join AUSA today.
The Association of the United States Army is pleased to welcome you to AUSA's Noon Report webinar series. This webinar series features presentation by senior Army leaders responsible for key programs and initiatives. It also features contemporary military authors who weave together the past, present, and future story of the United States Army. Kicking off today's webinar is AUSA's Vice President of Leadership and Education, Lieutenant General Retired Les Smith.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Association of the United States Army's Noon Report. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. We appreciate your support as partners in defense of our nation. Joining us today is John H. Davis, author of Combat to College, Applying a Military Mentality as a Student Veteran. For those of us joining online today, please take advantage of having John here today to ask your questions. You can use the Questions and Answer tab on the right side of your screen to submit a question. After the discussion, we will take as many questions as possible. You can also find the full bio for John Davis and our moderator, Chief Warrant Officer 5, Phyllis Wilson, in the Handouts tab. As stated, our moderator for today's discussion is Chief Warrant Officer 5, Phyllis Wilson, U.S. Army retired. Chief Wilson served as the 5th Command Chief Warrant Officer for the United States Army Reserve. She's the president of the Women's and Military Service for America Memorial Foundation and serves on the boards of directors for the Allied Forces Foundation, the Army's Women's Foundation, and the Association of the United States Army, where she is also a senior fellow. Chief Wilson, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, General Smith. Let me introduce to you this incredible guy sitting next to me today. John is a combat veteran, an author, and a Harvard graduate. He's spoken to Congress as a legislative fellow for the VFW and Student Veterans of America. John is an infantry squad leader, was an infantry squad leader in the 101st. I don't think you want to do that anymore, John. Was in the 101st Airborne Division, and he developed a coaching program for student veterans. He's an AUSA book program author and the author of Combat to College, also the Student Veteran Semester Journal and the Freedom Challenge. John lives in a really cool place, the Dominican Republic. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thank you so much for joining us today for the Noon Report.
It is a tremendous honor to be here. You know, I set out writing my book, Combat to College, to first give veterans the confidence that higher education is for them, and secondly, to give them the skills and abilities to be able to graduate. Because around 60% of veterans never even touch their GI Bill. And a lot of veterans that start college don't finish. So that's where my book comes in, to teach veterans that your military skills and abilities can actually be transferred into higher education. You know, I mentioned the Harvard thing because I went from failing out of community college before I joined the military to having a master's degree from Harvard on the other side. Because I figured out you don't really have to be that smart if you're a warrior. You don't really have to be that smart if you're willing to consistently put in the work. And I wrote my book, you know, partially because it didn't exist. And there's every self-help book under the sun out there in the entire world on every topic, but nothing to help student veterans. And college is so often the first place that veterans go when they leave the military. But when we start there, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. Student veterans tend to be older. Student veterans tend to require employment during their education. Student veterans tend to be first-generation students. Student veterans also are more likely to be married, divorced, or have families. When you combine that with the fact that student veterans, around 60% of them, have some kind of service-connected disability. All these things provide tremendous challenges for veterans in the classroom. And you add that to the reality is when student veterans are transitioning into college, they're getting out of the military, which is a complicated endeavor in and of itself. It's not like you just you're working at Domino's, you take your shirt off, hand your name tag in, and suddenly, you're out. Getting out of the military is a complex process. You're also moving across the country or even the world. You have a veteran getting out of the military from Japan and going to school in Texas, or getting out from Germany and going to school in New York. So it's a complicated process. On top of that, you're starting college. And most veterans have been out of traditional education for at least during their military service. They didn't graduate high school last year. They graduated high school like 8 years ago. The veteran life isn't necessarily as linear as the civilian experience. If you think about your classic linear civilian life, you're born, you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, etc. Veterans do things a little out of order. We're more likely to get married younger. We go to school later, we retire sooner or later. I mean, it's a complicated process. So I view military as somewhat of a bridge between I view college as somewhat of a bridge between the military and civilian worlds, but it's easy to fall off that bridge. I think about getting out of the military like you're boarding a ship in military land and you're sailing it across to the civilian side. And there's no such thing as a smooth journey. Every veteran is going to encounter some type of obstacles in their military to civilian transition. Some veterans take a little bit longer. They hit some storms, they go through some issues to get to the civilian side. And there are veterans out there that really never feel as comfortable in civilian life as they do in the military. What college does in a unique way, I think, is provide veterans an environment where they can have time to grow. You're going to have support. You're going to have resources. You're also going to have a measure of structure. There's no environment in the entire world as structured as the U.S. military. Your day is planned from when you wake up to when you go to sleep. And college provides a semi-structure for veterans where it's like, okay, I go to class at this time, and that is a helpful transition for veterans. It also provides, an opportunity where veterans can develop community around themselves. And community is one of those things that veterans, I think really miss from the military. And college provides an opportunity to make community with both your civilian peers as well as other student veterans. When I first started working in the veteran community when I got out of the military with homeless veterans. And a gentleman I was working with, his name was Jason. And he, like a lot of veterans, he got out of the military and he started college. Jason had PTSD from his multiple Iraq tours. He struggled academically. He struggled to fit in college. He didn't come from a great family. And, unfortunately, Jason ended up dropping out and then becoming homeless. And that's when I met him and started working with him. So I thought to myself, how can I get upstream of these types of issues in the veteran community? Upstream is a popular military analogy about getting ahead of problems. Like you and me are sitting at a riverbank and we see some veterans floating by drowning. We hop in and save them. And then some more veterans are floating and drowning. We hop in and save them. And then more and more. And then finally, you get out and you start heading upriver. And I said, Chief, where are you going? We got to save these veterans. And you say, I'm going to see who's throwing these veterans in the river. So that's where I really wanted to get back to find out where veterans are struggling, because momentum is such a critical concept in the military. Momentum is important in a football game. Momentum is important on the battlefield. Momentum is important in life. And that first year when veterans get out of the military is really, I think, one of the most important years of their lives. That's when they're going to set up and develop good habits, develop good routines, and kind of have the opportunity to spiral upwards in life. But like Jason, you also have challenges in any transition. I was very fortunate to get a job working with student veterans at the VA when I was doing my undergrad. And this gave me kind of an in-depth look at the variety of issues that student veterans face. So I was giving student veterans tours of the campus. I was certifying their benefits, so I got to see some of the bureaucratic side of it, making sure they got money for books. I was also taking them on tours, showing them where support services were, and working in my Student Veterans of America chapter. So I ended up making a list for incoming student veterans, and because I'm super creative, I call it John's College Tips. And it had little bullets and a little paragraph, and I would give it to incoming student veterans. And those tips ended up morphing into the chapters of my book. And I think that's why my book relates with people, because it's really a common sense approach to education in how veterans can take what you learn in the military, those skills, the discipline, the resilience, and apply it to higher education. Because we do have advantages over your traditional students. For starters, we know how to be on time, which doesn't really sound like a lot to military people because, of course, they're going to be on time. But on the civilian side, it actually makes a huge difference. My first college class, I remember because I approached it like a military mission. I had my campus map. I did a map recon, the week before. I plotted out my points, this class here, and then a few days before, I did a dry fire. I walked through, okay, here's class A, here's class B, here's class C, got it. And then the day of course, I showed up 15 minutes early, because if you're not 15 minutes early, then you're late. Exactly. So I showed up, and I'm sitting in the classroom, and I'm the only person in there. And I think to myself, time goes by, about 5 minutes before class starts, I start to panic, because I imagine being late for a military class or a military formation. And about 2 minutes before class starts, finally other students come in, the professor comes in right on time, and over half the class was late on the very first day. And coming from the military, that's such an unforgivable thing. I know that, if you're holding a military formation or military class and half the people are late, then you're going to have to make some changes. So that's when I realized, okay, John, you're in a different world now. You're in a different world. And veterans have so many strengths to evaluate when it comes to their education, such as commitment. We really understand commitment in a way that civilians kind of struggle to. So that's why in my book, one of the chapters is called This Is Your New Contract. And it talks about treating your education, treating your class schedule like a contract. Because if you join the military for 4 years, you're going to do every day of those 4 years, all the way to midnight, till the day you get out. You're doing every single second of it. And when you approach your classroom schedule like a military contract, you're going to be successful. Other things veterans understand that makes them successful is repetition. A successful military career, especially yours, over the span of 37 years, a successful military career is a slow process. It's day in, day out of proving yourself year after year, and that's kind of what education is. If you take an axe and you hit a tree in 1,000 different places, nothing's going to happen. If you take an axe and you hit it in the same place 1,000 times, that tree is going to fall. And that's what education is, where veterans can really excel. Is you show up, pay attention, study, repeat. Pay attention, show up, study, repeat. You do it over and over, time after time. And veterans can really be successful in that. In my coaching programs I develop and student veteran groups I work with, we also have a program called Reach Up and Reach Down. And what this means is you're always a mentor, and you always have a mentor, and you always mentor someone else. And this works really well with veterans who are comfortable with someone being in charge of them, and you're in charge of someone else. So you have a role model, and you have someone to be a role model too. But it's not always the easiest thing for veterans. I did struggle transitioning to college. I remember, I think my second semester, a professor asked me to stay after class. And he's like, John, I love what you're doing. I love your attitude. I love your energy, but you have to watch your language. And I said, what are you talking about? He's like, you said the F word like 4 times today. And in the military culture and infantry culture, I don't think a single military day is done without quite a few F-bombs in it. So there are things that we have to take from the military and some things that we leave behind. Some good habits to take forward and some habits to leave behind. Military people tend to be very blunt when it comes to conversations and not afraid about offending people, not afraid of dark humor or sarcasm. And some of those things are not really acceptable in corporate culture or education. Student veterans can also struggle because we're used to such an active hands-on learning experience, where in the military, you can't learn how to shoot a gun from a PowerPoint. But in classic education, a little more passive. So you're a little more, you have to sit there, you pay attention to the PowerPoint, you take notes. So veterans can struggle with that. When you look at the military overall, you have 2 classes or 2 kind of groups of people. You have your officers and you have enlisted. It's the same way all the way across the branches. And these people have similar military experiences. You eat the same food, you go on the same deployments, you do the same training, you have access to the same benefits when you get out. But these groups have significantly different outcomes. Officers make more money. Officers are less likely to struggle with PTSD. They're less likely to be addicted. They're less likely to be homeless. They're even less likely to kill themselves. And the big difference between officers and enlisted, usually in the military, is the college degree. And that's when I started viewing education as not something where, hey, I want to put a diploma on the wall, or I want to make my mom and dad proud, or I want a better job or promotion, but actually is something to greatly improve the quality of veterans' lives and even potentially save lives. And for veterans, one of the most important things when it comes to education is not necessarily the grades. A lot of veterans get over focused on grades because we like to be competitive, and we learn in the military, mistakes can be fatal. Mistakes can mean death. But the most important things for student veterans is actually maximizing your college time and making the most of it. A lot of veterans, one of the mistakes veterans make, I address in my book, is you have to set yourself up for success post-graduation while you're in school. You can't pay attention, take the test, pass your classes, walk across the graduation stage, get a diploma, and say, okay, now what? A lot of veterans fall into that trap where they're only thinking about the next step. So one of the things my book gets into is really how to network as a student veteran, really, because college is one of the most incredible places in the world for networking. In the military, as you know, your competency, your ability, your potential, all those things are vitally important. In the civilian world, who you know matters a little bit more. And college provides an opportunity to get to know people, and people put you in front of opportunities. On every college campus, you have your professors, which are a great networking resource. You have professional opportunities. You have internships. You have clubs. You can network with other student veterans. It's an environment of growth for everyone. A lot of veterans, they think, okay, when I do my networking, I'm gonna put on my suit and tie and go to a networking event, expo, once or twice a year. But in college, it's something that can happen every year, where you really have to think about setting yourself up for graduation before you get there, because college is really just a stepping stone. Now, I don't think that college is for everyone. I don't put that message out there that every veteran, absolutely needs to go to college. And the GI Bill recognizes that. Now the GI Bill is more flexible than it's ever been. You can use the GI Bill for vocational programs, internships, scuba school, flight school, police academies. There's all these certification programs that you can get utilizing the GI Bill. And although traditional college might not be for every veteran, lifelong learning is. One of the benefits of the military, which I know you know after 37 years of service, is it puts you in a state of continual progression, in which every day in the military requires a stronger and smarter version of you. Every year in the military, you're going to be sent to professional schools. You're going to be sent on training and deployments. You're going to be given responsibilities. And in civilian life, it's easy to stagnate. That's why things like the Noon Report here, or podcasts, or other veteran resources are critically important for veterans to continue learning when you got out of the military. Because stagnation, is just as dangerous as isolation for veterans. Veterans need to pursue lives of growth after the military, whereas the military forces that growth. You have to push yourself to it in the civilian life. So, I think having my book be a member of the AUSA book program has really been a tremendous opportunity for me to get my mission of helping student veterans kind of out there and gain some credibility. I'd like to thank AUSA as well as the book program director, Joseph Craig, for putting my book in front of more people and helping me in my mission of helping student veterans. And I would like to reiterate that, my firm belief that when more veterans go to school and they graduate, we have the potential to see a decline in some of the negative metrics we associate with the veteran community. And so I really think education is the key. I don't view it as the cure for veteran issues, but I certainly view it as somewhat of a treatment. So it's some of a treatment for the issues in the veteran community.
Yeah, John, thank you so much. That was powerful, and you know what? It hit me personally because we were talking earlier before we started the Noon Report about obviously different generations. I've served in the military longer than he's been alive. Kind of sad. Makes me feel very old, but all well and good. But at the same time, after I completed 4 years on active duty, during that time frame, I had married another soldier, had 2 little boys while we were deployed, serving over in Germany. And when I left active duty, stayed in the reserve, came back to the States and started attending college. So now I've got this household, I've got little rugrats, I've got all of the things you were talking about. And one of the things that, this was back when we were defending the Fulda Gap, and we took that very seriously, certainly. But I also was one of those young troops that after the Beirut barracks bombing of the Marines, those that were killed were flown up to Germany first for processing, and I was part of that team. And you can never not see that again, right? But I was training to become a registered nurse, and that was why I volunteered to do that work. It just seemed really important to me at the time. But then you go sit in those classrooms, and you're listening to these 18-year-olds talking about drivel, nothing. Their big issues of the day have nothing to do with the things you and I have seen and endured. And and you're thinking, wait, we're in the same class, I'm studying, I'm paying attention. But one thing I really loved too that you talked about was, you know, not everybody is going to be a straight A student.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a time to learn that even though academically I felt like I was empowered to achieve straight A's, when you balance it across life, 2 little kids, then a husband that deploys and breaks his back while he's deployed, and now I'm helping to care for him. And I got to the point where, you know what, a B or a C is not going to kill me. I'm still going to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to learn to stop, you know, this always striving for being the best at everything. I think that's one of the things we always were taught to do in the military, mm-hmm. because it isn't all about us. It's taking care of the rest of the squad, the rest of the team. And we've got to be our best to bring it, to make sure that they're okay. So I really find that fascinating. One of the questions I have, though, when I introduced you, I said that, you know, you addressed Congress. So what was it like to speak at Congress about student veteran issues, and what did they take away? Did you feel like you were heard?
It was a mixed experience. I think like all people get when they work with politics. What I wanted to do was create more employment opportunities for student veterans during their education, because like we talked about, they're more likely to need to work, they're more likely to support they need to support their families. And I wanted the VA to pay for employment for veterans at their campuses, mm-hmm. so they could, you know, stop worrying about finances so much, because financial health is kind of mental health. In the way that if you're constantly stressed about bills, if you're constantly stressed about how you're going to make your car payment, it's going to be tough to pay attention in your class. So I got the opportunity to go and speak with members of Congress to try and put my proposal forward in order to get more VA funding for this. Overall, it didn't work, but some Congress members made me feel heard. Some did not. You know, I remember one experience that really sticks with me when I was had the opportunity to meet with a congresswoman from my home state of Iowa. So I was very happy to do that. And I had charts and graphs, and you know, I had a lot of passion for it because I really want to get this done. And I started my presentation, and about 30 seconds in, she goes, "John, okay, I have about another 30 seconds left. Then I got to run." And I trained for like 6 months to get to this point. I had charts, graphs, and I was just kind of floored by it, because, you know, that's when I kind of took it upon myself to think, okay, as veterans, we can't rely on other people to save us. We have to save ourselves and save mm-hmm. each other. And the politicians that you know, are supposed to be serving us veterans might not be their first priority. So that really gave me kind of a wake-up call and a mission that I need to do this. It's not something I can pawn off on someone else or expect anyone else to do. I need to help student veterans.
Wow. Yeah. And so that was the genesis of this book, or had you already written it?
I had already started to work on it, and that was kind of what really made me want to take off and work hard on it, because as student veterans, we're such a unique population in which, you know, you're only a student veteran for a short period of time. So my book...
Oh, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Lifelong learning, sir. I beg to differ.
And a lot of the lessons
in
of my book
now.
are not only for college, they're a course for life, because being successful is something that goes beyond the classroom.
Because I can see you'll be working on your doctorate someday, and so student veterans, I think, is a great moniker. It goes hand in hand with that lifelong learning. Mm-hmm. So I love that part. Can you talk a little bit about this coaching program that you've come up with, this Combat to College Growth Method? What's that about?
Yeah, so I have the coaching program on my website, but a lot of the issues that student veterans face are sometimes more out of the classroom than into the classroom, mm-hmm. because we tend to be those non-traditional students. So what my coaching program does is guide veterans through a semester, and we do things like set goals. We set an emotional goal, a social goal, a physical goal, and an academic goal. And the academic goal can be, you know, pass all your classes, and that is a perfectly fine goal. The physical goal can be, hey, I want to go to the gym 3 times a week, because taking care of your physical health is how you take care of your mental health as well. Mm-hmm. So the program kind of takes veterans through in some of my mentorship stuff, and you do it with someone else. So the institutions that use my coaching program, you know, everyone has a mentor, and everyone mentors someone else. So everyone is pushing towards specific goals during the semester. Everyone has a mission, because a veteran without a mission is a veteran at risk.
Wow. You know, as I went through one of the programs, it was the brigade pre-command course out at Leavenworth, and we were assigned a mentor. Happened to be Ann McDonald, who was retired as brigadier general.
Good mentor.
First class at West Point that women were graduated from. And what an incredible mentor mm-hmm. that I had. And I had her for 1 year as a result of that. And we developed these goals similar to what you're talking about. And she checked on me. She would phone me along the way? How's it going? Because I had a family goal. I had been in the military, deployed all these places and working hard, and had really lost touch. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and I sucked at coordinating and talking with them or getting together. And thank goodness, this tripped me up a little bit. We reconnected, and we actually decided we were going to have this 5 kids, grown kids obviously, all get together at least once a year. And thank goodness we did that, because we lost one of our brothers to COVID. And we would have never imagined that would happen. He was 59 years old. But thank goodness for these little coaching things that you don't think it will impact me for life, right? So thank you for what you do with the coaching. Let's talk a little bit about how you help student veterans find a support system on campus besides this mentorship up and down. What are the programs on a campus that they can lean into?
So most campuses now, we're fortunate to have, quite a few student veteran organizations. Student Veterans of America is a great organization. I was an officer in my Student Veterans of America chapter. Okay. And what we would do was take specific steps to build community. We would do things like, hey, bowling night. On Veterans Day, we'd have Veterans Day ball where we'd all get dressed up and have a good time. But you also have to kind of break out of your veteran-only bubble during college. A lot of veterans are more comfortable with other veterans, but you have to find ways to find community outside the veteran community. So colleges have clubs. There's opportunities to volunteer, like we talked about. I think one of the beautiful things about veterans is we do volunteer a lot more than civilians. And getting opportunities where you volunteer actually puts you in a position to network and meet people. You're going to meet politicians and business leaders and influential people in your community if you take the effort to volunteer. So I think veterans should start within their veteran community and then branch out as they become more comfortable on their campus.
Yeah, I'm going to totally flip it now, and I want to know a little bit about, this is personal, I guess.
Okay.
What's it like as a veteran to live abroad?
It's actually, veterans started moving abroad after the Vietnam War. That's when you saw a big percentage of veterans who came back and maybe experienced mistreatment say, okay, well, I'm going to take my pension and I'm going to go elsewhere. And now I live in the Dominican Republic, and we have over 20,000 veterans that live in the Dominican Republic. And a lot of people are kind of shocked to hear that. We even have medical programs through the Foreign Medical Program, so I can go get pretty much all the treatment I would get through a VA in the Dominican Republic. We also have community events with the veterans that live down there. We have monthly barbecues and things like that, so it's a lot of fun. And then when you just look at kind of the fact that you can have a higher standard of living for a low cost, we're here in Washington, D.C., and a military retirement here isn't going to go as far as it would in the Dominican Republic. So I think veterans also enjoy nature. We spend our military careers outside. Our military careers are spent outside. We're outside as kids. And then we get out of the military, we kind of retreat indoors with the rest of the world. Americans spend now 90% of our time indoors. And living in the Dominican Republic, I'm able to be outside year round, swim in the ocean, go in nature, and do things that are therapeutic for my own mental health.
How many veterans, do you have any idea, are abroad globally?
Overall, it's hard to say. I wouldn't know. I know 20,000 Dominican Republic, and every country has quite a big expat population now, especially with the explosion of like working online. So you can you can work online in a different country and get your money here in the States. So it's a pretty solid deal.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
I'll start looking at real estate for you.
Yeah, even General Smith is thumbing up on that one. Yeah. I love to travel, so that's great. For myself personally, some of the success in the classroom, some tips on not just in the classroom, but around the campus. And I think, like you were talking about earlier, the idea of arriving on time for the class itself. But a lot of our students, whether they're veterans or not, I know my children, they thought you went to class and that was it. Even though they knew in high school they had homework, it didn't cross their minds that on average, it's a 3-to-1 ratio. For every hour you spend in the classroom, it's anticipated you'll spend 3 hours outside of the classroom doing the work to prepare for the next session, to bone up and be ready for exams or write papers and all those kind of things. And I think that was a bit of a shock that while you may carry 12 credit hours, that might be 10 or 12 hours in the class, but that means another 20 plus 30 hours a week if you're going to excel. So what are some tips, strategic tips on one, going to the classroom prepared and then budgeting your time properly when you're not in the classroom?
Time management is more important for student veterans than it is your traditional student, because we usually have more going on. You might have to deal with the VA, you're going to have your family, you're going to have work, more so than the classic 19-year-old college student. So what I recommend student veterans to do is first learn to say no. One of the chapters of my book, Learn to Say No. You have to say no to the things that are going to stop you from accomplishing your mission. So that might mean no to Friday nights out. It might mean no to your family and friends, because you have to be successful in college. Another thing that's useful from the military mentality is think about a training calendar in the military. Every month, every week, you have a training calendar. Build that calendar for yourself based on your college success. So in a training calendar in the military, you're going to have physical fitness. You have to incorporate that in, because physical health is very important. You have your class time, and then you have your self-growth time. So what I would say to veterans is look at your life like a training calendar and make that for yourself. Work with your mentor to make the most productive calendar you can for every week of college.
Yeah, that sounds great. Were you able
Everything's
to?
easier said than done.
That's the thing, because life always gets in our way.
It
So
does.
how did you find a way to, if you sort of slipped up on something, how did you personally, or did you mentor others that when they'd sort of blown the whole training calendar, how do you go back and reset it and say, okay, it's like trying to be on a diet and saying, okay, but then one day you're hot fudge sundaing and the whole bit, and say, okay, hate yourself for the moment, get right back up on that horse the next day. What's the best practice?
Every veteran is going to experience obstacles and issues in their education. You're going to fail tests. You might fail a class. The important thing is you keep going. So like I mentioned kind of in the intro, if you're a warrior, doesn't matter how smart you are. Keep that warrior mentality. Although it might slip sometimes, you have to bring it back. And you do that through keeping community, which keeps your accountability. Your mentor and the person that you're mentoring is going to keep you accountable to yourself. You should always strive to do the best you can, but like you mentioned, there's going to be hiccups along the way. Don't overstress about your grades, because in 5 years from now, unless you're planning to go to like a real competitive law school or something like that, your grades aren't going to matter. Your C's get degrees. A lot of veterans tend to be hyper competitive, so they want to get the best possible grades they can, when 5 years from now, it's not going to matter. What is going to matter is things like your resume. How many leadership positions do you have? What kind of internships did you do? What type of programs are you running? These are the things that are going to be more important than necessarily the grade point average. So if you fail a test, if you fail a class, get up tomorrow and do it again.
That's super powerful, because that's the thing. A lot of people, obviously, now you have a degree from Harvard, which is one of those names that is so well recognized. My degrees, because I used tuition assistance as much as I could while I was still active duty, but Webster University, a fine university, and the subject matter that I employed, I chose what I wanted to get my degrees in, or Excelsior University. Completely online, and it worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes you've got to, and that was something that I did a little later in life, when I had I feel like I built that muscle memory on how to be as dedicated and sophisticated on what you have to do for all online work. That's very easy to fall too far behind, and then suddenly you're out of that class. And if you're doing it while you're using tuition assistance, you owe that money back. And sometimes it's really hard for a soldier or a service member to be prepared to pay that back. So while we're talking primarily about the GI Bill, one thing I want to touch again is, you said there's a number of student veterans that don't finish, but they do use their GI Bill. But there's a huge percentage that don't use it, nor do they necessarily transfer it to other family members. Why do you think that is, and how can we fix that?
I think it's somewhat of lack of understanding how a GI Bill works. So you can transfer your GI Bill to a spouse or kids or stepkids. So if you're not going to use it yourself, at least transfer it so your children can go to school. At least transfer it so your spouse can go to school and take advantage of this benefit. Because I think the GI Bill, it might not be a you don't use it, you lose it type thing, but more veterans taking advantage of the GI Bill is going to be something good for the veteran community and all of America.
Now, with that transferring of the benefits, when does a service member need to make that transfer election?
So now with the Forever GI Bill, it changes things a little bit. Every veteran's going to have a different experience based on when they served and when they got out. So what you do is contact the VA rep, and look at your educational benefits. If you go to your My VA, it'll tell you how much you're qualified for, how much time you have, and all that. So you have to get with your VA counselor to find out when you need to transfer it by or when you need to use it by.
Because at one point you had to have done it while you were still on active duty.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore.
No, it's not the case anymore, which is good because you might have a kid 5 years out, or something like that.
Right, exactly. And then you couldn't have possibly transferred it to somebody that was not yet with you. Yeah, that's helpful. So one of the questions I'm seeing up here, obviously we didn't necessarily admit, but what did you do when you were up on Long Island?
I was the Army recruiter. So the, which was both the worst and best thing that ever happened to me, I guess, because I was getting ready to go deploy again down in the 101st, and I got an email that said, you're going to Long Island, New York to be a recruiter. I had never even heard of Long Island before, and I said, no, I don't want to do that. And they said, doesn't matter what you want, you're going to Long Island, New York. So I got up to go to Long Island, New York, and got to recruit for the Army, which was great to be ambassador for the military, but also not really something that I was super motivated to do.
So amazing, beautiful terrain in Long Island. I guess I thought it was going to be all city, but it isn't. It's very many rural areas. I mean, big tractors out there plowing ground on Long Island. But the question is, what can be done to boost Army recruiting numbers? How do we get that be all you can be mentality back?
Well, I think it's important to understand, I got a great idea for this. It's important to understand where the military comes from. The military comes from military families. Well, around 80% of the military actually comes from military families. So you have to keep your customer base happy and treat it like a business. I was a recruiter, spent years out in the community talking about the Army, and recently an idea came to me on how to turn this around. You might laugh a little bit at first, but here we go.
Okay.
What you do a Veterans Day lottery. Every Veterans Day, November 11th, you take 11 veterans, pick them randomly from the VA system, you fly them down to Washington, D.C. You give every one of these veterans a check for $1 million. This $1 million or $11 million overall is better than the Army spending $11 million on Facebook ads, or the Air Force shooting a commercial to show at movie theaters, or the Navy paying $11 million for billboards. This $11 million is going to increase visibility on the military community. It's going to honor the people willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice. It's going to create incredible human interest stories with these 11 veterans, and it's going to give America something to be excited about. And I think we're in a time now where America would like something positive to be excited about. So I think this is going to get a lot of visibility on the military and get more people to join.
You've been thinking about this.
I was waiting to say it. Hey, go send it to your congressman, make it go viral. That's the idea.
This sounds like a DOD/VA budgeting thing, because both sides would win.
You're the person to talk to. I think that would be a great idea to boost military recruiting numbers and get more people excited about the military.
What made you choose along the way? Where did you go for your undergraduate?
St. Joseph's in New York.
In New York, okay. So how did you choose? The question is, what should a veteran look for when selecting a school?
So one of the first things to look for is the veteran community within that school. Go check and see if there's a good community of veterans within that institution. If you look on their website, student veteran groups will have Facebook information, all those things where you can contact the student veterans actively going to the school. Another thing to check is graduation rates. What kind of graduation rates does this college have? So what I recommend veterans to do is start at the school you're going to finish. A lot of veterans think, okay, I'll start out at community college, gain a little bit of traction, a little bit of momentum, and then transfer over to the four-year school I want to get my degree. Well, I think you should start at the four-year school, because that's going to, it's just one more transition to add in that's a little more complicated. When you're looking at schools, I would say first graduation rate, second veteran community, third program. You want to find something that you're interested in doing. You want to find professors you're interested in taking classes with. So look at all those things when you're evaluating, making decisions, and most importantly, read my book, obviously.
Buy and read your book. Yeah, I getcha. Right. So it says, what can student veterans do to build their resumes beyond that getting good grades? And you spoke to that a little bit about volunteering and doing internships, and that all sounds well and good. The volunteering is a little bit easier, I suppose. But for many veterans, the idea of how do you get an internship? Where do you even look? How do you get started on finding an internship?
So every college is going to have I forget what the department is called, but a professional department or whatever, where it's going to help people get jobs afterwards. Because one of the things that colleges want to do is demonstrate that the people graduating that institution are going into good professions and getting hired. Because if you have a school that's graduating people and nobody's getting hired anywhere, then it doesn't make much sense to go to that school. So for veterans to build their resume, you have to think beyond like your 3-point or 2-point, whatever graduation GPA. You have to think about what kind of experiences that employers are going to want to see. Some of it's the volunteering, but a lot of it, they want to see experiences beyond the military. If you have an only military resume, that's not really something employers in today's world are going to want to see that much. There are a lot of companies out there that, work hard to hire veterans, but there is somewhat of an anti-veteran discrimination that can be sometimes in employment. They can view veterans as having PTSD or being too rigid or not embracing flexibility. So you have to think about those things when you're crafting your resume and start building it your freshman year in college. So when you get to be a senior in college, when you're about to graduate, it's ready to go. You don't want to start thinking about your resume your senior year. Take on opportunities like I was an officer in my Student Veterans of America chapter. So that looks good on my resume to take a leadership position within the veteran community. But like I said, you have to break out of your veteran bubble sometimes and get into the community besides just veteran organizations.
So let's talk a little bit more in depth on that resume, though. And you said it shouldn't be like a military resume. I absolutely agree. And it's sort of like dropping the F-bombs, which I think both you and I, given our assignments, we were good at that at one point in our lives.
Yeah.
But we've learned doesn't happen anymore unless you're really, really upset about something and you've got to be still in the right environment. But it's saved for a very important day, if you will. Our resumes tend to still use the lingo of the military, and corporate America, they can't make heads or tails out of what that is saying. When you're talking about being a squad leader, what does that mean? Or you're a company commander. When they think company, they think the company, the organization. It could be a big Fortune 500 company, and you're talking about you were 25 years old and you were a company commander. It doesn't make any sense to them. So how do we clean that up? And who did you have a mentor that helped sort of review that, or did you just figure it out on your own?
I think you have to always run your ideas and concepts by other people. As veterans, I think that we hate asking for help sometimes. And that's why it's good, instead of thinking about calling for help, say I want to call for support. When I was getting shot at in Afghanistan, I didn't call for help on my radio, I called for support on my radio, which sounds a lot better. And you want to gather all the support you can to win your college mission, to win your life mission. And one of those things is going to be working with other people. One of those things is going to be asking other people to be on your team. Your team is kind of like your armor. You have to build it up around yourself, and you have to surround yourself with good people. So that's where your mentor comes in. That's where utilizing resources at your college, like the professional divisions, come in. That's when working with veteran organizations who are going to help you with your resume come in. So now we live in an online age where there's lots of resources available. So veterans just have to look for resources. In the military, they come to you. And civilian life, you have to look for them. And I think that's a big difference, because in the military, we think of responsibility as communal. We have the group responsibility, we have the team responsibility, but responsibility on the civilian side is really more individual. And that's one of the things that veterans have to embrace, is taking personal responsibility in the individual realm of their civilian lives.
Yeah, they don't get that squad leader to help take care of them anymore, do they?
No one's going to yell at you to be better or knock on your door in the morning if you're not at work. You have to do it for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned ways that veterans can adapt to college. What are some steps that colleges can take to help accommodate veterans into their space?
One thing that I say to professors when I'm at schools is veterans are used to a specific kind of learning. That learning is communal and it's experiential. So like I mentioned earlier, we like to do the hands-on training. So any way you can make the material engage with the student, as well as student engage with the material, is good. And like the communal learning, in a military classroom, you're with people and you're all thinking about how you can be better together. So the more communal aspects you can forge in your classroom, the better. And that's going to help the student veteran in the room get to know their peers. One of the things veterans tend to do in college is self-isolate. If you're the only veteran in the room, it can really be an uncomfortable position to be in. I remember sitting in a college classroom and I kind of felt like Adam Sandler and Billy Madison, where he's around all like the second graders and little kids and stuff. And so any way you can do to get that veteran kind of out of their shell is important. As well, I usually tell veterans, hey, go ahead and, I usually tell professors, address that veteran specifically and say, hey, thank you for your service. If there's anything I can do to support you in this class, let me know. And that's going to make them more likely to come to you for help in the future if they fall behind, and also direct that veteran towards resources to help them. So if you're like a biology professor, say, hey, this is the biology tutor I recommend if you fall behind. And when you make that advanced step, it's going to save problems later on for that individual student veteran.
Yeah. So I'm going to roll up these last two questions, and thank you to everybody that sent questions in. We really do appreciate that. One of the questions is, how do professors best support student veterans in the classroom? And it also says, with Veterans Day coming up, what should colleges do for veterans on their campus? And I want to roll those two into another, you started planting the seed, this Veterans Day thing. But how about if we also talk about Department of Education or Department of Defense finding ways to support? I think the best way that professors can support student veterans in the classroom is having more student veteran or veteran professors in the classroom that fully understand and appreciate. So get your PhD, get back in the classroom someday, and be one of those cadre of veterans that are now the professors. Because God knows, wouldn't you love to sit in a class with a veteran that is your professor?
I've never had a veteran professor before.
Yeah, well, nice. It's time to do that. And we got to find ways to encourage more to lead in that methodology. So what would you say? How can they best support student veterans, and what can colleges do for their veterans on campus on Veterans Day?
I'll say on Veterans Day, I think presents an opportunity on college campuses to do something like close the civilian military gap, which we all see growing. A lot of veterans are often the only veteran in the room, and a lot of the other students, that might be the only veteran they've ever met in their entire life. I remember when I was at school and someone had told me, oh, I've never met a veteran before, which was crazy because veterans were the only people I really knew. But of course, you have to understand that such a small percentage now of the population is serving in the military. So Veterans Day kind of provides a unique opportunity for, I'm speaking at a school for Veterans Day. We're going to have a veterans panel where students can ask veterans questions. At other schools, they have things like show and tell, or military members or student veterans will bring in some of their military gear. We had a thing where normal students had to put on the ruck that veterans had to use in Afghanistan, kind of feel the weight. So I think any way you can encourage interaction between the civilian population of school and the student veteran population of school around Veterans Day is critically important.
I think that's powerful. It's super important that we do those kind of things. So do you have any closing comments before we hand the podium and the baton back over to General Smith?
I guess I'd like to see that Veterans Day lottery come true. So that's the main thing. But secondary, I just want to reiterate that I do really feel like education is an underused thing. And when we get out of the military, I think more veterans should take advantage of the GI Bill. And I do view education as something critically important for our nation's veterans after the military. I think that if we can convince more veterans to go to college and we can get them through to graduation, then we're going to see a big jump in the veteran community's quality of life. I'd like to encourage you to check out my book on my website. I have more resources and information, as well as my coaching program for free for any student veteran organization that wants to use it.
John, thank you so much for taking the time to share this information. And let's hope that our veterans out there avail themselves of not only just college, but don't forget about all of the other training opportunities that the GI Bill covers. Thank you so much. General?
Wow. Thanks, Phyllis and John, for such a great discussion. Before we depart, I want to inform you of a few upcoming events. We will host a coffee series with General Gary Brito, the 18th Commanding General of the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, which will be held on 20 September at AUSA headquarters here in Arlington. The annual AUSA annual meeting will be 9 through 11 October at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center in Washington, D.C. I'm looking forward to it. On 2 November, we will also host a new report with Major General Greg Martin, U.S. Army retired, author of Bipolar General, My Forever War with Mental Illness. We will also host a new report with L. Scott Lingenfelter, author of Yanks and Blue Berets, American UN Peacekeepers in the Middle East on 5 December. I hope you can join us for an upcoming webinar. There are many other great speakers that we have scheduled. For more information about any of these events or to register, please visit our website at ausa.org. Finally, we want to thank all of you who support us with your membership. Membership matters. You help us support the Army. Thank you again for attending, and have a great Army Day. Hua.